Welcome to Wrestling Talk. I'm Leonard Kaplan, and we're starting off on a very strange footing here. I made a mistake at the beginning, which you will not hear. I'm Leonard Kaplan, and I've been doing this show for 30-odd years, and I still make mistakes, but that's the part of the charm of the show. And I have no co-host at the moment to guide me on the right path or to set me on the wrong path. So I am here with Vic Vicious, which is the wrestling name of our next guest. And I want you to pronounce your first and last name, my friend.
Well, on my birth certificate, it says Victor Manuel Solo Gaistor Jr., but most know me as Vic Solo.
Vic Solo. All
Yes.
right. And you have many siblings, and they don't all do what you do.
Nope.
And you've had a multifaceted career. And I want to go through it all because you're a creative individual. You have a long history with the IWF, the International Wrestling Federation, but I want to know how you got there. I want to know how you left the active world of professional wrestling because you are a young, strong-looking guy. You look like you could get in the ring right now. So let's start with childhood. What was your dream when you were growing up? Was it professional wrestling?
Yes, it was. I got into professional wrestling as a fan, thanks to my grandfather, my mother's dad, who was a Marine, United States Marine, and Gunnery Sergeant Merlin Page, and he always watched wrestling, and he got me into it through the WWF. And then a little bit later on, Channel 25, before it became a Fox affiliate, WXNE, used to show us world-class championship wrestling. And once I saw the Von Erichs and the Freebirds, I was hooked. I've been watching it ever since. As far as the IWF, I grew up in Middleborough, Massachusetts, and Walter Kowalski, the Killer, as everybody knows him in the wrestling world, who ran and owned the IWF, would bring a wrestling show to Middleborough, among other towns. And in 1991, he brought one as a fundraiser for the Middleborough Police Union. And I got involved as the guy who was doing a local cable TV show called Wrestling Classics. And we promoted the show on the air. And I brought my crew, as well as the Middleborough High School Video Technology Program, to cover the show. It was a 4-camera shoot, and we gave a copy of it to Walter on VHS back in those days. For those of you under 35, that's a cassette, a VHS cassette. And it all blossomed from there. Basically, I gave Walter TV time, and he gave me not wrestling experience in the beginning. In the beginning, I was a manager. And I managed Brittany Brown, my first and favorite client, and my big sister in my heart. And I managed people like Flying Bill Wilcox, Jamie the Geek, Tony Roy, Freight Train Fulton, a list of many people in the IWF. But at the same time, I was also kind of a rogue wrestler. I was, without any formal training, I was appearing on shows because they needed bodies. They just needed, job guys to put over their stars. So I went out and said, yeah, I've been trained, and no one questioned it. And I just went out and jobbed all these independent guys. And as time rolled on and my relationship with Walter Kowalski and the IWF and everybody involved got better, fast forward to 1993, Brittany Brown needs a partner for a mixed tag in Middleborough and says to Walter, what about Vic? And Walter's like, let's give him a shot. So we had a big mixed tag team match against Snooky Fink and Rosebud. We won because I pinned Snooky, and that's pretty much. And I still continue to manage, and that's how my experience with the IWF got started.
Now, what year was that when you actually entered the IWF?
So I first got involved in 1991.
Okay.
That'd be the year I first got involved.
So you never met my poor late co-host, Paul Fay?
No, but I watched you guys on TV when you were on WHLL 27 out of Worcester.
That's how a lot of people discovered us then, even though it was 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Fun times.
Absolutely.
So you're a contemporary of Brittany in the class of IWF that entered around 1991.
Yeah.
So in that year, what was the IWF in as far as its standing within the wrestling world? Was Walter letting his guys go try out for WWF at that time?
He was sending guys to do jobs on TV. He was sending Chris Duffy, Jerry Seavey, Tim McNeely, Bert Centeno, a couple other fellows whose names escape. Carmella's dad, Paul Vandal. So yeah, there was a few guys that he was, and Perry Saturn later on, and but I never got that rub. I never got to do that because Vic was a young kid that didn't like to listen.
So you have a very booming, magnificent voice. And why were you not an announcer, or were you, or a commentator, or anything like that?
I actually did do some commentary for the at the time they were called New England Wrestling in New Bedford,
Hmm.
promoted by Joe Eugenio, and Silvano Souza was the booker. And I had done some, in addition to doing some commentary for their videos. What they did is they filmed all their matches, but they had no one to do commentary. They heard about my cable show in Middleborough, and they're like, "Hey, let's get this kid." And then it got out that I was also doing jobs, in the ring and independent. So they would actually have me do jobs in the ring occasionally, and then they would have me do commentary for their shows as well for the local cable channel, and then for Walter shows that we covered uh, on back then Continental Cablevision. I was never the play-by-play man or the color man, but I'd be the backstage interviewer in 1991 and 1992. And in 1993, like I said, I got into the ring for the mixed tag, which was one of the featured matches on the card. Main event, of course, was Jimmy Superfly Snooker and the Mountie. But because I was the local guy, that was considered a marquee match. And Walter was worried. He's like, "Are you going to get over as a heel?" I said, "Trust me, Walter, I will." And I've got the match on DVD, and if you watch it, my hometown booed the crap out of me.
That's great. So you fulfilled your heel duty at that
Hey,
time.
absolutely.
So, what are your best moments in professional wrestling, particularly the IWF? And did you venture far beyond the IWF?
Well, I was only with the IWF for a short time, for about almost 4 years. And of course, at that time, and we're going back to now, this is 1993, 94. There were still territories at the time, not as many as there were in the 70s and 80s, but there were still some territories, and I was going out to some of those. And I did one shot for Clifford Bart's New England Wrestling Federation in Vermont, where I lost to, here's a name from the past, I lost to the Metal Maniac in 90 seconds.
Were you around when my crew, we did a show called Pile Driver, and we recorded some of Cliff's matches, including Brittany? Were you there at that time? Because I didn't
Yes, I
know you
was.
then.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That was quite a time uh, following those guys around. I got to know Axe a little bit,
Bill Eadie,
and
yeah.
yeah, very nice guy.
Remains a
Uh,
friend to this day. Yeah.
yeah, nice guy. Um, so you're friends with a lot of professional wrestlers, both living and dead,
Yeah.
because I see on Facebook when there's an anniversary of a death, you'll point out that he was a friend of yours and a really good friend. How did this come about?
Through Nikolai Volkov, I got to meet the Iron Sheik, Cosgrove Vaziri. I got to meet, well, someone who's still living. I got to meet Terry Sapinski, the warlord. And then through him, I got to meet Sione Valhali, the barbarian.
Hmm.
And just going out to these territories, especially down south. There was a time where I went down south and I was involved with the Southern Wrestling Alliance out of Lexington, Kentucky. And there I got to meet Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant. And I got to meet, oh God, I remember some of the other fellow, Tommy Rich. I got to meet the Fantastics, beautiful Bobby Eaton, doing just these small spot shows in these little independent organizations down there. SWA was written, I was not written, it was run by a guy named Cecil, whose last name escapes me, but he wrestled under the name terrific Terry Embry. He was the kayfabe cousin of Eric Embry. And because I was Vic Vicious, he was like, "Oh, you can be the kayfabe cousin of Sid, and we'll do a little program." So we did a little program down south there, and just everyone I met knew somebody, and all these independent shows, I would wind up, meeting Nikolai, and he would met like I mentioned some guys he introduced me to, and then I got to meet Ravishing Rick Rude through Walter, because he'd done a show, one and only IWF show in Middleborough in 1991 as a last minute replacement for Greg the Hammer Valentine, who ended up re-signing with the WWF at the time. And through Barb, I got to meet a lot of the Samoans. I got to meet Yokozuna. Then, of course, in the IWF, people can say what they want, but he was a superstar in my heart. Chris Duffy, who's no longer with us, another one of my best friends in the business.
Great guy, great guy.
Absolutely.
We had him on here a lot.
I loved watching him on your show.
We have another phone call.
We had the most fun feud.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to remember some of the other fellas and ladies that I get. Well, through Brittany, I get to meet the fabulous Moolah and Mae Young, and then through them, I get to meet Leilani Kai, and I get to meet Desiree Peterson and Donna Cristianello, and oh gosh, there's others I just can't think. They were all at the LIWA convention that Moolah, the one and only New England convention she did at Lombardo's at Randolph back in 1998. And yeah, so I'm just you meet somebody, they know somebody, and then you go into a locker room and you see someone that you don't act like a starstruck fan. You just walk over and say, "Hey, how are you?" You introduce yourself, and they introduce themselves, and so yeah, but just being out there and being a journeyman, I get to meet the.
Aside from Brittany, who was your best friend that people would know in the wrestling world?
Rick Rude, Ravishing Rick Rude.
I saw that in the Facebook entry. So he was a very hard person to get to know, because
he was.
I was just saying hi to him. He wouldn't respond if you didn't know him.
Yeah,
very interesting guy. What's that?
He took a liking to me for some reason.
Yeah, that's well. You were one of the boys. That's the trust that's inherent within professional wrestling, because your lives are in each other's hands.
Absolutely.
So you can't trust a mark like me at the time.
Rick gave me the best advice ever, and I mentioned this at the last IWF reunion that we had back in September. I got a call from Herb Abrams, the guy that was running the UWF. Anybody who's watched Dark Side of the Ring knows who Herb Abrams is. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Yeah, I've heard about you. I've seen some film of you. I'd like you to come for the UWF. I'm doing this big show, blah, blah, blah." And I had seen Rick on an episode. They used to run it on Sports Channel on Saturday morning. So I saw Rick on an episode where they were trying to get a program with him and Don Morocco going. And Rick ended up leaving and going to WCW instead. And Don ended up going back to Hawaii. And so I'm like, well, I trust Rick. And Rick knows he's met this Herb Abrams cat. So let me call Rick. And I laid it out to him. "Yeah, Rick, Herb Abrams called me, blah, blah, blah." And Rick gave me one word: "Don't." So I didn't.
Wow. Well, you trusted him. So
absolutely,
that speaks volumes,
Yep.
What made you leave active professional wrestling that you loved so much, that you had so much valuable experience in?
Well, I left twice. The first time I left was in 2005. Lisa, my wife of 20 years, and I were still living in Massachusetts at that time. For the benefit of those who don't know, I live in Kissimmee, Florida. Have been here for 6.5 years. But from Massachusetts, was living in Taunton, Massachusetts at the time. And Lisa and I were coming down here to go on our annual Disney World vacation. The night before, I had wrestled a match for the Ultimate Championship Wrestling territory that was run by Anthony Rufo. And I was in the main event, tag team match. Sean Candido and I worked with Travis Funk and Iceberg Sonny D. for the UCW tag team titles. And we put the champs over. The next day, Lisa and I get on a plane, Southwest direct flight to Disney. And anybody who knows me, you know, Len, I love to talk. I'm a hard guy to shut up. But on that flight, I didn't say much. I was just sitting there. Lisa looks at me and she's like, "You okay?" And just without even thinking about it, I said, "I think I just wrestled my last match."
Wow.
I don't know what it was. I just knew.
Wow.
I
So
just knew.
You can't explain it. You couldn't explain it then, and you can't explain it now.
Not that time. I can explain the second time I left.
Okay.
Because the 2 years later, 2007, I became a dad. My daughter Ariana was born April 2nd, 2007, also in Boston. And so being a dad, I was devoting all my time to, at the time I was working for Best Buy, if you can believe that. And I was doing inventory and asset protection. And I was also doing my music, my singing, which we'll get into a little bit later. I was doing my singing on the side. And I was like, you know, I want to be around for my kid. I don't want to get all banged up. So I'm not going back to wrestling. But some years later, I think she was 7 or 8 years old. She started asking questions because she would hear me talk about it. And she's like, "What's this wrestling thing you're talking about? Like the stuff on TV?" And I said, "Let me show you." So I showed her some film of what I did. And she's like, "Huh, I never get to see you do that." Light bulb goes off. At the time, Mike Baker started House of Bricks Pro Wrestling in the New Bedford area. And Mike was an old friend of mine. Brickhouse Baker was his wrestling name back in the old Yankee Pro days. So he and I had some matches together, and we became good. We're still good friends to this day. And he's by happenstance, he was putting together a show called Flashback Friday Night, in which he brought back all the old stars of Yankee Pro from the late 80s, early 90s. And I'm like, "Mike, what do you think?" He's, "Yeah, come on down." He played it smart. For this first one, he did an open invitational 22-man battle royal with all the old timers, just to see how everybody looked. Obviously, I didn't win the battle royal, but that's beside the point. Year later, he does Flashback Friday Night once again. Mike knows my family, meaning my wife and my daughter, are in the audience. He puts me in a three-way dance match with the trash man Rob Roberts and another lifelong friend, Travis Funk. And who wins the three-way dance? This guy. I'm like, wow, I actually won a match. And to see my daughter jump up and crazily start clapping, I'm just like, that's what it's about right there. So I kept wrestling. I did a few more matches, but then I left the second time because in a fatal four-way match, don't remember who the other guys were except Dangerous Donnie Rotten, who's still a friend to this day too. We were taught to bump correctly when taking a clothesline. Vic didn't bump correctly this particular night, and I sprained my back. And that's when I said, you know what? That's a higher power's way of saying, "Oh man, you don't belong in the ring no more."
So was that the first injury you ever had that was that severe?
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. That sounds like a sign, doesn't it? It really does.
It sure does. And by happenstance, what was it? 3 months later, I moved to Florida.
Now, we'll talk about that move in a minute, but first, what if Ariana wanted to go into professional wrestling? What would you say to her?
Over my dead body.
Now, why is that? Because that's your dream. Why can't she have that?
Well, thankfully, it's not her dream. But I will say that I think that if it was the same business that I was in, and obviously we know everything marches on, everything changes, time changes everything. But if it was the same business when I get in, I would have helped her. If she really wanted to, I would have helped her get in. But the way the business is now, yes, I do still watch WWE and AEW and New Japan and NWA, but I'm a fan now.
Yeah.
And I just don't like the way that a lot of the promotions treat the women these days. And I wouldn't want Ariana to be a part of that. And thankfully, like I said, she doesn't want to do it anymore.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that because in my view, and I admittedly haven't been watching as much as I used to, but from what I've experienced since AJ Lee left, and Flair's daughter and Becky Lynch and Emma, all those people. There was sort of a renaissance in women's wrestling in WWE, and they got rid of the diva name. It seems to me that it's a better place for women in professional wrestling since the time of the divas and before. So what do you see that's negative?
I think they're a lot rougher on each other than they used to be. I harken back to the AEW match between Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, where they went kind of like an ECW style, thumbtacks and ladders and chairs and things like that. And I'm watching that and I'm like, okay, as a fan, as a wrestling fan, yes, this is exciting, but as a dad, if my daughter said she wanted to do that, no, no way. And still, even though they got rid of the diva title, I still think that it's so looks oriented. And when I say looks, I don't necessarily mean good looks or even bad looks, but I think it's all depending on what type of gimmick they're playing. Look at Rhea Ripley. Rhea Ripley's got that goth look going on,
yeah.
And then AEW's got Abaddon, who looks like a zombie. And I wouldn't want Ariana to be a part of any of that.
Now, back in your time, maybe not in the independents, the WWE and to a lesser extent WCW was into the overt sexuality kind of thing with women. So wouldn't the look of today be an improvement over that?
Certainly. But I just, even if I had a son, I wouldn't want him in wrestling either.
Really?
If I could steal it from Apollo Creed and Rocky, use your head, go to school, be a thinker, not a stinker.
That's very interesting, your views on women's wrestling. And when you explain it, it makes perfect sense. Of course, there's always the political aspect of professional wrestling, which in any political nonsense in schools, in any industry, is always a factor, and usually a negative factor. What have you seen backstage that would turn you off, that maybe turned you off in some locker rooms?
Well, one of the biggest things that I hated is the most successful guys and gals were always the ones who had the promoter's ear. It's almost as if nothing was ever judged on athletic merit or your ability to get your character over. I always hear the argument that people say, "Oh, so and so wasn't a very good worker," and I'm like, "Well, define that." Ted DiBiase defined it best for me. A good wrestler is a wrestler. Possesses the fundamental tools and holds and counter holds of wrestling. A great worker can get his character over, tell a story in the ring, and not hurt himself or his opponent. On a scale of 1 to 10, was Vic Vicious a great wrestler? I was a 3.5 at best. I knew maybe 4 holds. But as a worker, I was a solid 10 because I got my character over. I never hurt anyone, and I told my story. Even though I lost a lot, my story was I was a villainous heel, and wrestling has always been a morality play, good versus evil, and you want to see good prevail over evil. And I didn't mind being that villain that took the fall.
Let's talk about your creation and Brittany Brown's of the IWF Hall of Fame and the IWF reunions. The reunions, for those out there who don't know, they're big events, and a Hall of Fame award is presented. I was a proud and very surprised recipient one year of that. Totally blindsided. How did this come about, and why did you do it?
So the reunion came first, and the reunion came about in the year 2013 because of all things, I love telling the story. I was watching a documentary on Glow, the gorgeous ladies of wrestling. And Angelina Ashton, who is a friend, who wrestled under the name Little Egypt for Glow, decided to do a reunion at a hotel in Los Angeles of all the Glow girls. And they even got Mount Fiji, Emily Dole, who at the time was in a nursing home, they actually got her to the reunion. And I was watching that and I was like, why can't we do that? Because I haven't seen outside of at the time outside of Brittany, I hadn't really seen anyone from the IWF in years. So I called her. I was still in Massachusetts at the time. I called her and ran this by her, and she said, "Never in a million years will this work. So you'll never get everybody together." I said, "Let's try it." It was very informal. We got together at Kowloon on a Saturday night, and Brittany was there, myself, Tubby Muffet, Don Bravo, Battling Bruce Battaglia, Magnificent Mike Davis, Vito Carlucci, Fabulous 99. A bunch of people showed up. And Patty was like, wow, maybe we can do this. I said, yeah. So then we moved it over to Hajar's in Weymouth for a couple of years. You came the second year we were at Hajar's, and that's when you and I finally met face to face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never forget that. I still got that picture of you and I together. And that was also when I said to Patty, I'm like, you know what? We should do a Hall of Fame. I said, let's honor those who made their mark in the IWF. And our first class, not surprisingly, was our longtime champion, Mad Dog Richard, our senior referee, Paul Richard, our longtime ring announcer, the ring announcer who Howard Finkel said was his very favorite, Mel Simons, and Rosebud. So that was our first class and our very first Hall of Fame.
Wow. And they're a lot of fun, those events, and
Oh yeah,
you get to see people and but you know, I have to tell the story for those wrestling talk people out there who don't know about my experience with the Hall of Fame. Ed Whittier, my former co-host in an earlier version of Wrestling Talk when it was still on cable, was with me, and I was listening, having dinner, and I'm hearing this description of somebody who's going to get the Hall of Fame award. And I'm eating and I'm listening and I'm thinking, geez, this sounds awful familiar. And I started to, like, my heart started to beat. And I said to myself, it can't be. I'm not a wrestler. I was never on the road. And I realized that when the speech was done, it was probably going to be me. And I was terrified. I'll tell you why I was terrified, because so many deserving wrestlers who actually walked the walk and took the bumps and all that stuff, and not everybody was on this show. And who the hell am I to receive this award? And it happened, and it was the most surreal experience. I had to get up there and make a speech, and I don't know what I said. We never record these things,
right.
at least in the early days. I wish I had a recording of it, or maybe I'm glad I don't. But and it struck me, you know, because I had seen WWE Hall of Fame things, that this was more real than any Hall of Fame that's national or international in other industries, because you're surprised. The element of surprise is totally real. And that's the way it should be, you know. In WWE, they get contracts, they sign agreements, they get a salary, you know, and it's just totally, it's all, but it's not, it's a semblance of a Hall of Fame.
Right.
So thank you very much again for inducting me, to you and Brittany and whoever else made the decision, because it gave me a taste of authenticity in something that you're involved in for a long period of time, and you don't realize the impact that you had. And I didn't realize it, you know.
Well, it was well deserved because in our mind and hearts, you were our Mean Gene. You were the interviewer guy. You got people and when you hyped us on Wrestling Talk, you got people excited for the IWF. You know, and Mean Gene was in Vince's Hall of Fame. You had to be in Walter's.
Well,
No
I
question.
appreciate it. I think the fact that really threw me was that it was still a young Hall of Fame, so not everybody was inducted. But I was like almost at the top, and I'm like, okay, I'll take it, but do it later. Do it in another year. These wrestlers are gonna kill me. I really thought they were gonna kill me. I thought that they justifiably so would say, wait a minute, how about me? Because a lot of them got hurt. They have lifelong injuries, and you know, here I
But
am just
it
walking
was
in.
the exact opposite, Len, because they all knew what you meant to the IWF, and they were all proud.
Wow, thank you so much. Well, so
Welcome.
enough of me. I want to talk about your move to Florida, which dovetails with the story I just told about the Hall of Fame and the reunion. You moved to Florida at a time when the Hall of Fame and the reunion were becoming a regular thing, and you actually made it a hardship for yourself to monetarily and distance-wise to show up. But you show up for all of them, and you organize all of them with Brittany. And how did that come about?
Well, as anybody knows who followed the move, it was not easy. However, it just so happened that first year, 2018, because we did the 2017 reunion literally a couple of weeks before I moved.
Mm-hmm.
So the following year, the 2018, that happened to fall shortly thereafter. Number one, Disney, who I just happened to start working for, won contract negotiations for raises, and they paid us all the retro back pay we were owed because it took so long for that to happen. And number two, President Donald Trump at the time gave us very nice bonuses. So from there on out, money was never a problem to get, and flights back to Massachusetts, if you catch them at the right time, never a problem.
Interesting. Okay. So why the move to Florida after a lifelong residency in Massachusetts?
Well, better weather here, in my humble opinion. Also, Disney is here, so I love you and I both share, and
Yeah.
I'm fortunate to be working for Mickey Mouse. But also, there's no state income tax here, and there's always some, because of the weather, because of the fact that it never snows here, it never gets, you know, Arctic cold. There's always something to do year round. And this is where my family and I vacationed every year for 15 years straight before the move. And Lisa and I had always talked about moving here even before Ariana was born. And an opportunity came to sell our house in Taunton and to come here. And like I said, it wasn't easy in the beginning, but things fell into place, and we're here 6.5 years later.
So that's interesting because in between jobs, teaching jobs, I considered, gee, maybe I should work not in Florida, but at Disney stores, which were everywhere in the country at the time. But I decided, I love it too much. I don't want to start hating it. Sometimes people you work for aren't what you envisioned. It's like a marriage,
Yeah, sure.
that you might lose. I didn't want to lose the luster, the specialness of when I would go to Disney. And you were part of that because you invited myself and my friends that time, and that Canadian steakhouse was just
Oh,
amazing, amazing. I could taste it now,
mm.
you know. And so thank you again for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
And now, how is Disney in reality to work with? Because you actually went through with it, and I did not.
Well, I love it. And one of the biggest things I love about it is the fact that you're not limited. I mean, yes, I am a custodian, but when I applied, I did not apply for custodial. I applied for attractions. I wanted to work with the rides or the shows or what
Right.
have you. But at the time, the only thing available was custodial. So in my mind, said, let me get my foot in the door. But I fell in love with custodial and stayed there. And the pay, the perks, the benefits, second to none. I can't argue with any of it. And going on, piggybacking on what you were talking about, losing the luster, maybe hating it. I'm proud to say 6.5 years later, that still hasn't happened. I still love it. Is it perfect? No. No job is, no industry is, no company is.
Yeah.
But I still love it. And as a lot of people know, 2 months ago, I left the Magic Kingdom. I'm at Epcot now, which is my favorite park. And I'm loving every second of it.
And you must get to eat at that steakhouse anytime you want.
Actually, no. I mean, I do get a nice discount, but it's
Okay.
still not something I can afford to do every week.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, especially in these times. That's for sure.
In fact, the last time I ate there was with you.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And that's before COVID. So, wow.
Yes.
Okay. And we're almost in 2024 here.
Yeah.
So let's go. We've covered professional wrestling. We've covered your move to Disney, the IWF, and the Hall of Fame, and the reunion. I want to get into your other aspects of your entertainment life. And I would imagine this springboarded off of your experience as a commentary on professional wrestling and announcing, using that magnificent voice to entertain people. Describe how you got into that, because I know you got into that up here in Massachusetts first.
Yes, I did. And actually, contrary to popular belief, I actually started doing that before wrestling.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And as a teacher, you will appreciate this because it all started in high school.
Hmm.
Now, at Middleborough High School, where I went, graduated class of 1991, we did not have a drama department like a lot of schools. We had the speech and theater workshop,
Hmm.
in which we would do dramatic plays, comedic plays, musicals. And at the end of the year, we did a variety show called That's Entertainment. And every year, That's Entertainment had a theme. In 1989, my sophomore year in high school, the theme was television. So Mrs. Osborne, my teacher, who I'm still friends with to this day, says, "Okay, gang, TV. I want to do something for Ed Sullivan." And a buddy of mine jumped up and said, "Oh, me and Adam and this guy, we want to do the Beatles." I said, "Absolutely." Ed Sullivan broke the Beatles in America. It's in 1964. Says, "But then we got to do Elvis." And a bunch of fingers point at me, and I look up and go, "What?" And they're like, "Vic, you have his hair." Like, yeah, so that doesn't mean I can sing. And Mrs. Osborne's like, "No, Vic, I think you can do this." Okay.
Hmm.
Long story short, the costuming ladies made a ramshackle jumpsuit. I sang Can't Help Falling in Love from Blue Hawaii. And then I said, wow, I can actually pull this off. So I started picking my Uncle Jimmy's brain because he was a huge Elvis fan. And I started watching the movies and watching concert films. And can't remember the name of the place, but there was this little club in Middleborough that had karaoke at the time. So I would go and start singing Elvis's songs and got a reaction. And then bought the black leather jumpsuit from 68, went out and presented that as a show. And then I got into the nursing homes because I worked at a nursing home in East Bridgewater, worked in the kitchen as a dietary aide and a PM cook. And I saw the entertainers that were coming in there, and I was just like, okay, they sound good, they're good musicians, but they're not doing. Alice Cooper once said, if people want to listen to music, you sit home and put on a record. If they're coming to see you, do something. So I'm like, I went to the activities director and was like, can I do this? And because I already work here, I won't charge you anything. Oh yeah, absolutely. And then pretty soon it was like, maybe I could go make some money doing this. So I started calling the sister homes because the home was owned by a corporation, and they had other homes in the area owned by the same company. So little by little, I put my feelers out, and this is before the internet. Now I'm putting my feelers out. I'm putting together promo packages with pictures and sending stuff out. And before you knew it, all my days off, I was perpetually on the road doing Elvis. That turned into Neil Diamond. That turned into Jimmy Buffett. That turned into the Beatles. That turned into the Village People. That turned into what you name, country. I have a alter ego, Cowboy Sam, and it all steamrolled from there.
Now, the first time I became aware of this was when you were in Florida and you were talking about it online, and you vowed at the time to give up your Elvis character.
That's right.
And you gave it up for a few years.
Yes, I
Why did
did.
you give it up, and why did you come back with it?
So I gave it up because before we moved to Florida, when I was doing this full time, the last 4.5 years that I was in Massachusetts, the entertainment at the nursing homes, the senior centers, that was my full time job. I
Mhm.
was doing 2 shows a day, Monday through Saturday, off on Sunday. Occasionally, I would do a Sunday show. During National Elvis Week, I would do 3 shows a day in August. The week of his birthday in January the 8th, I would do 3 shows a day.
Mhm.
And then it got to the point where I was burnt out. And I wasn't doing just Elvis. I was doing all the shows I just mentioned, plus some
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I was just, you know what, I'm tired of this. And also, I couldn't go anywhere. We would go in a market basket to go grocery shopping. Hey, Elvis! Hey, oh, here we go again. My daughter and I, one day we did a daddy daughter date at Ruby Tuesday,
Mhm.
and these people came over and to our table and, hey, we saw you at the such and such senior center. You were great, and you did this, and it's like, yes, I'm trying to have dinner with my daughter right now. It got to be too much, so that's why when I moved to Florida, I said never going to do it again.
Right.
Why I brought it back? 2 reasons. One, I missed it, and two, I was going to play it smart this time. Now it's not my full. I have the full time job at Disney. This is going to be a sidebar, but yet the beauty here is I can do it. I can go to the Terrace of Kissimmee or I go to Plantation Bay in St. Cloud and entertain those people for an hour, and then I can go walk around Animal Kingdom and nobody knows me from a hole in the wall.
Right.
I love the anonymity.
Very interesting. So I'm going to ask you some stuff here
Huh.
that is kind of playing devil's advocate. All right.
Ah,
So Paul Fay, my late original co-host and co-creator of Wrestling Talk, he was an Elvis imitator.
yes.
And he did a thing at Max's Pub, which was our hangout, and we did a lot of commercials for them. We used to give away tickets for our show when we would do live events and stuff like that from there. But I was with Paul. We would do skits and stuff like that for this show. And every once in a while, like with you, we would meet people who had seen him as Elvis, and most of them were just like what you said. They were appreciative. They, wanted to know when he was going to sing again. But every once in a while, he would get, not always when he was with me, naysayers that, oh, you don't sound like Elvis. Um, and Paul would, I was really worried about Paul at one point because he was very, very hurt by this stuff. So in all three of your careers, I'm gonna be the worst. I'm gonna be the worst people that you probably have met. Why do you wrestle for a bush league small wrestling federation? Why do you do Elvis? You don't sound like Elvis. What you know what I'm getting at? How do you handle people like that? The naysayers, the people who don't believe. What do you do? What do you do mentally to prepare for stuff like that? Or why are you still a janitor at Disney? How do you handle all that?
Well, as far as the Disney question, why are you still a custodian at Walt Disney World? I say, well, I like to pay my bills and I like to eat.
Mhm.
As far as singing, it brings me great joy. It's my vice. You know, some people smoke, some people drink, some people do drugs. I don't do any of that. This is my vice. This is how I let go. This is how I release my inner demons, so to speak, and I leave it all on the stage when I'm or the front of the room. When I'm done, it's like somebody once said you could almost see the toxins come out of my body. It's like you can see Vic is relaxed now,
Yeah. Yeah.
and because I don't stay still when I'm singing. And I have a YouTube channel if anybody wants to check it out, Solo Man 730, that has clips as recently as a few days ago
Hmm.
of me singing, and you'll see what I'm saying. I'm not
Hmm.
a tree when I'm singing. I'm all around that room with a wireless mic like a Tasmanian devil.
You're unleashed.
Yes.
That's very interesting. So, especially in this day and age, our era, is probably the most rude era in American history.
Absolutely.
People are very horrible to each other, and there's
Absolutely.
no filter, there's no empathy, there's nothing.
Right.
It's because of the anonymity of the internet, and that translates to being rude in person sometimes
Yep.
because people don't learn the social skills that they used to learn before the internet,
Right.
So, that you handle it great. You never let it discourage you. You got to believe in yourself. That's what you're
And
saying.
I will say this: if anybody doubts if I still like Elvis,
Hmm.
look
Yeah,
behind me.
of course. I noticed that right off.
That's the
I,
king. That's the man.
yeah,
He's my favorite entertainer of all time.
yeah, and you like the Village People too. I know that.
I love the Village People. Well, let's clarify. I love the Kings of Disco. There's two
Mm-hmm.
groups now.
Mm-hmm.
The Kings of Disco are the guys that were carrying on the Village People name, while former original lead singer and lyricist Victor Willis was in prison. But when he got out of prison, long story short, court case, he gets the name back because he did write the songs. It was proven that another credited co-writer did not write anything. So he took the name, he made a new group, and Ray Simpson and the boys became Kings of Disco. So now I'm a Kings of Disco fan.
Very interesting. So, we'll talk about disco just for a minute. The movie Saturday Night Fever, I had seen it when it came out, like everybody else, and I was a rock guy.
Yep,
I'm a Beatles, and it was always like the rock people against the disco people.
right.
And it just seemed natural. So when I first found out you loved the Beatles and disco, it didn't jive with me. I'm thinking, how can this be? Now, back in the day, was this the case? Of course, you were younger.
Well, yeah,
You
but
were in high school.
well, in 1979, I was 6 years old, and
Yeah,
that's the
okay.
year. That's the year that all the rock guys started doing disco records because that's the only way they were going to sell records. Rod
Yeah,
Stewart, the
yeah,
Stones,
yeah,
Kiss,
yeah,
Electric Light Orchestra, Bad
yeah,
Company. They all put out disco records because that was the way they were going to make money.
yeah, that's true.
But I've got the most eclectic taste you'll ever find, Len. I love Elvis, the Village People, Kings of Disco, Beatles, Neil Diamond, the Monkees, the Stones, and yes, I love the Spice Girls. Thank you very much.
See, I have other friends like you who have a more open-minded, relaxed set of people that they're fans of.
Yeah.
And they have a lot more fun than I do. And you have a lot more fun than I do because nothing bothers you. I get bothered by things I don't like. And I can't understand. Of course, I don't say it aloud, like, how can you like that crap or whatever? But inside I'm like, what? Like when punk rock came out, I didn't really get it, you know?
That was a genre
Um,
I didn't get into, yeah.
and the disco, I didn't. First of all, I don't like getting dressed up, so I couldn't have gone on the disco floor, you know. So I'm very opinionated, I guess. And when
Sure.
when you're opinionated, you don't have as much fun as people who aren't. I wish I wasn't so opinionated, but that's who I am, you know.
Well, Len, if you want a true confession, as you know, I ride the bus to and from work every day, and I always have my headphones in. You want to know who I actually listen to more than anyone?
Oh,
George Harrison.
no kidding.
I listen to
No
George more than
kidding.
anyone.
No, I never would have thought that. Have you ever done George in your act?
As a matter of fact, I just launched a new show a couple months ago called After Fab, where I do
Ah,
four solo songs by Ringo, four by George, four by Paul,
wow.
four by
Yeah.
Ben. Yep,
Well, we'll have to have a conversation about that off air, about fandom of the solo stuff, because I'm a big fan of that as
as am I.
well.
Yeah,
I don't put it above the Beatles stuff, but
no,
I appreciate it for what it is, you know.
absolutely.
Um, anyway, so let's see. Is there any aspect of your career that you would like to discuss that I have not mentioned that I didn't know about?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I always wanted to be in a movie, and it
Mhm.
kind of happened. Someone you and I both know very well, Evan Ginsberg
Yeah.
and Darren Antola we're producing that movie
350 days.
350 days. So Darren had reached out to Evan because he was looking for photographs of certain wrestlers. And
Yeah.
Evan's like, let me ask Lalani Kai.
Yeah.
And Lalani's like, oh, yeah. I know a guy that when he was a kid, before he got in the business, used to take pictures at every show. So he needed pictures of in and out of the ring, one-man gang, George Steele and Paul Orndorff.
Hmm.
So I submitted those pictures for the film. My name is in the credits.
Mhm.
I got paid for the use of those pictures.
Wow.
But what I did, I'm thinking, no, I did not do it on purpose. There's a picture of Paul Orndorff walking into the back of the Worcester Centrum with 14-year-old Vic in corduroys and a Hawaiian shirt. So I'm in a movie.
That's wild. That's
Yeah.
wild. That's
But
great.
I always wanted to do acting because I did acting on stage at the Speech and Theater Workshop in high school.
Mhm.
But there's different roles in like musicals or dramatic plays that I would have loved to have played. And believe it or not, the one role I would have loved to play, but never did, was Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. My favorite
Wow.
musical.
Interesting. Yeah. See, now musicals, I like that musical. I like West Side Story,
Yep.
but I'm not otherwise a fan of musicals. I
I'm
probably
picky
should
with
have
my
seen.
musicals.
What's
Yeah,
that?
I'm picky. I'm picky with musicals. I love Fiddler. I love West Side Story. I love South Pacific. I love Singing in the Rain. Those
Yeah.
are some of my favorites.
I like movies that make me suspend my disbelief, like a good wrestling angle, storyline,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
But when they interrupt the movie and I lose track of the story, that's when I kind of drop it, you
Sure.
know.
Well, my
So
favorite movie of all time is not the original 1968 Planet of the Apes. That's just
I
nothing will ever top that for me.
I love that movie as well.
Yes.
If you're ever with me when I walk on the beach, I'll do my Charlton Heston imitation when he's near the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, I got to see that.
It needs the sound effects of the waves.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, maybe I'll do my Morris Evans as Dr. Zayas for you.
Great movies. Did you ever see Soylent Green?
Yes.
I love that one.
Excellent. I love Charlton Heston's one of my like top 3 favorite actors of all time. I
Yeah,
love his stuff.
same here.
Yeah. What's it? Oh, the Omega Man, another one he did that I liked.
Yeah. I think that was an adaptation of The Last Man on Earth or something.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a book.
Yep.
So anyway, we're starting to veer into our own private stuff here. So I think that's my cue that this is over unless you have any final word. Oh, I have a final question.
Sure.
What is left for Vic Solo to do? What have you, as Charlton Heston would say, what have I left undone? As Moses. What have you left undone?
Well, I've thought about that, and it's amazing because my dream was to be, from the time I was 4 years old, was to be a professional wrestler, and I did that. And then I wanted to sing, not so much be a famous rock star, but I wanted to sing. I did that. I wanted to work for Disney. I did that. I wanted to live in Florida. I wanted to travel. I've been all over the Western Hemisphere, from Canada to the tip of South America, and I've been to the UK. So I've done some traveling. My father is from Guatemala. I've been there to see family. My mom is from Canada. I've been there. I've been a husband. I've been a father. I've been in a movie, kind of. I don't know what's left. I don't know what's left. I really don't. I guess I just want to ride this spaceship Earth. Epcot reference. I want to ride this spaceship Earth to the end of time, and I just look back and say, I had a good life. And so far, I can look back and say I've had a good life. And have I been perfect? No, far from it. But I've never been incarcerated. I've never done time. I said earlier, I don't drink and do drugs. That doesn't mean I never did in the past, but I don't now. Are my eating habits healthy? No, but the way I see it, this food here on the earth, let's eat it. I guess, yeah, just watch my daughter grow up, because a privilege to look at the world through her eyes for me. Taking her to Disney for the first time when she was 2.5, taking her to Universal Studios for the first time, seeing her experience things that I didn't get to experience as a kid. And my hat, Gatorland, that's become my happy place. And I just want to keep going there and experiencing everything over there. They have wonderful educational programs as well as the animals that you can see there. And they have holiday events. And so, yeah, I just want to live this wonderful Florida life. And as long as I can get on a plane, I want to keep hosting the IWF Reunion and Hall of Fame.
Sounds great. I hope you do it for 50 more years.
Sounds good to me.
All right. This has been Wrestling Talk. My special guest is Vic Solo, Vicious Vic. And Vic, I will see you on the next reunion. I'll see you online. And for all of you out there, this is Leonard Kaplan for another special Wrestling Talk, saying so long and stay in the ring. That would really hurt Paul when people would come up to him like that. And, and as Paul would say, not related to him, he would say, well, like if I was feeling bad about something, he'd say, well, not everybody likes the Beatles. So he sometimes forgot his own saying. And that's true. Whenever you feel bad about yourself or some mistake you made or somebody didn't appreciate what you do, if you remember that nobody even now, it's not unanimous. Nobody's unanimous about anybody's talent. There's always going to be some naysayers,
Sure.
Not everybody likes the Beatles. That's a great quote,
Yeah. And I've found in my entertainment, experience here and in Massachusetts, not everybody likes what I do. There's been people that I would come in to a nursing home or a COA and I would come in and do a show and they'd say, yeah, you're really not what we were looking for.
Wow.
Yeah. It's happened. It doesn't, I don't hit a home run every time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most people appreciate effort, but there are people who really, unfortunately, get pleasure out of other people's misery that they cause.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason I left Magic Kingdom.
Yeah. Wow.
Backstage, there was a lot of high school drama going on. And I just, I'm 50 years old. I don't need this.
Oh, that's awful.
And Epcot is just like, it's funny. There's a 72-year-old man, Frank Myers, who came over with me. And I trained him at Magic Kingdom when he first joined the team there. He came to me the other day and he's like, Vic, I got to tell you, this is paradise. I love this. I'm glad we left that tragic kingdom.
Now, why do you think in all the places you could work at Disney would people like that end up in the Magic Kingdom of all places?
I think that the company has veered so far away from what Walt originally envisioned that they're just putting bodies in positions and see if they last.
Yeah.
And as long as they do the job, they don't care what they're doing backstage.
Right. Yeah. So they stay out of it. They don't take any responsibility for their employees and their behavior.
Right.
That's not
unless
good.
They think that somebody might physically harm someone else or something like that. But
sounds like the people at Harvard and MIT about the anti-Semitism bit,
Yeah, and I once told one of my coworkers, I said, "Wow, the backstage politics of WDW aren't too far removed from WWE."
Yeah.
It's amazing how many wrestlers or ex-wrestlers I've seen in Disney.
Well,
Kevin Owens was just there a couple days ago.
Really?
He loves Epcot. He and his wife and daughter are always in Epcot.
Wow.
And I've seen Hulk Hogan there. I've seen Mick Foley, Kevin Nash, Tommaso Ciampa, Liv Morgan. I've seen a lot of them there.
John Lennon was there back in the day.
He signed. His signature was the last one to break up the Beatles. He signed it at the Polynesian.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Such a sad ending to such a great life.
Absolutely.
John Lennon. There's so many videos I guess it's my algorithm on YouTube. There's always Beatles and post Beatles videos coming up on my YouTube.
Oh, I get them too.
Yeah. So
Matter of fact, remember the song George Harrison did on one of his solo albums as a tribute to John all those years ago?
yeah.
Uh, that I do a rendition of that on my YouTube channel. There's a clip of me from one of my recent shows
Oh, huh.
singing that one because that was from the After Fab show.
Is there anything that now remember the course of our conversation? If there's any clips you want me to show, let me know
Sure.
and give me a link to them because I can download them myself.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, you could go to my YouTube channel, Solo Man 730. That's where all my music stuff is.
Okay, let me write this down.
I mean, the last few clips I put up there have been Christmas songs, but I got myself doing, like I said, the George Harrison, Elvis, Neil Diamond. I even have a clip of me doing the one Beatles song that my wife hates,
What's that?
Maxwell's Silver Hammer.
Oh, a lot of well, the Beatles themselves, other than Paul, hated that because they took
Yes, they
them days for them to record that. So yeah, I find it a pleasant song. I like the irony of it.
Yeah,
You know, it may not be worth all the money that they spent trying to perfect it, but you know, and somebody made a good point that a lot of George songs may have made it if they didn't spend so much time
right,
like on that song, onto Abbey Road
right.
or onto Let It Be. But I don't know.
Abbey Road, for the record, is my favorite album of theirs of all time. I
Yeah,
just love top
me
to bottom.
too. Me
Yeah.
too. I do a podcast, another show like this called The Beatlemaniacs. Have you seen it?
Yes.
Yeah. So we
Yeah,
have
I have
fun. We
watched
have
it.
fun. Did you
Yeah.
see our review of Now and Then?
No, I gotta watch that one because I think you saw it on my Facebook because I think you liked it.
Yeah.
I cried the first time I heard it.
Well,
It was just
I cried
oh
when I saw the video, but when I first
yes,
heard it, I was very disappointed because I just couldn't hear who was doing what.
right.
It sounded a little busy to me. But
Yeah.
when I saw it with the video, it had more of an impact because I could see what was going on, you
Yeah,
know.
I heard it for the first time through the video. I heard and watched it at the same time, and I sat there and cried.
Yeah. No, it's no, I'm not ashamed of that. I did that myself.
Yeah.
But so on our Beatlemaniac show, I got three co-hosts.
Okay.
There's four of us, and we don't always make it together. So my Now and Then episode, part one, is myself and a younger former student of mine back when I was in Swampscott in the 90s. And then the last two is actually a friend of Ed Whittier is one of the guys, and the other guy is friends with people I went to school with. Watch my interview with Sheldon if you haven't, because that's pretty good.
I'm going to check it out. And
Sheldon,
speaking of
Sheldon's
Sheldon, I got this in the mail thanks to Brittany Brown. I got his book.
awesome,
I'm
awesome.
hyped. I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, that's what we did the show about in his
Yeah.
book, and it was a really good read. It shows all of his experience that he absorbed. He puts himself in the mind of all the uh, people who are involved behind the scenes in wrestling, promotion, from wrestlers, from ad people, everybody,
Yeah.
So, well, have a good night. I'll talk to
You
you
as
soon.
well.
Take care.
Absolutely, my friend.
Bye, Vic. Thanks.